The city square pulsed with a restless energy, a cacophony of honks, shouts, and the ceaseless shuffle of feet on worn pavement. Amid the chaos, a small figure crouched on a threadbare blanket, his dark eyes gleaming with a quiet, unyielding hope. Malik, barely 12, clutched a dented tin cup, its few coins jingling faintly as the crowd surged past. His clothes, patched and faded, hung loosely on his wiry frame, and his bare feet bore the scars of a life spent navigating the city's unforgiving streets. Yet his gaze held a fire, a defiance that refused to be snuffed out by the world's indifference. Each morning he whispered the same prayer into the dawn. Let someone see me. Let someone care. Today, that prayer felt heavier, as if the universe itself was listening. Across the square, a sleek black car idled, its tinted windows shielding a man whose name was etched on the city's skyline. Jonathan Hargrove, a millionaire at 30, now nearing 50, was a titan of industry, his life a polished facade of power and precision. But beneath the tailored suit and steely demeanor, a wound festered. His daughter Ellie, 16 and radiant, despite her fragility, hadn't walked in years, her legs stilled by a rare neurological condition that mocked the best doctors money could buy. Jonathan had spent millions on specialists, treatments, experimental drugs, chasing a cure that always slipped through his fingers. Today, he was en route to yet another consultation, his heart a battlefield of hope and despair, when his driver slowed near the square, caught in the snarl of traffic. Malik's eyes locked onto the car, a glint of intuition sparking within him. He'd seen men like this before, sharp suits, distracted gazes, their lives orbiting a different sun. But something about this man's face, half visible through the window, drew him in. It was the shadow of pain, the kind Malik knew too well from his own life. Scrambling to his feet, he tucked his tin cup under his arm and darted through the crowd, weaving past vendors and pedestrians with the agility of someone who'd learned to survive. "Sir! Sir!" he shouted, his voice a thin thread against the city's roar. Jonathan, lost in thoughts of Ellie's latest test results, barely noticed until a small fist rapped on the car window, leaving a smudge on the pristine glass. "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again!" Malik blurted, the words spilling out with reckless, desperate courage. Jonathan froze, his hand hovering over the door handle. The boy's audacity was a jolt, like lightning cracking through a stormless sky. He rolled down the window, his blue eyes narrowing to slits. "What did you say?" His voice was low, edged with a skepticism honed by years of false promises. Malik stood his ground, though his heart thundered in his chest. "I know about your daughter, sir. Ellie. I've seen her picture in the papers. I can help her walk again." The crowd flowed around them, oblivious to the gravity of the moment. Jonathan's jaw tightened, his mind screaming that this was a scam, a cruel trick to prey on his pain. Yet the boy's eyes, wide, earnest, blazing with conviction, held him captive. "You're out of your depth, kid," Jonathan said, but his voice wavered, betraying a crack in his armor. "No one can help her." Malik didn't flinch, his small frame radiating a quiet power. "I know someone who can, a healer, not a doctor, not like the ones you've tried. She helped my sister when no one else could." His words carried the weight of truth, each syllable laced with the memory of his sister, Aisha. 2 years ago, a fever had stolen her strength, leaving her bedridden in their crumbling shack. The doctors, overworked and underfunded, had shrugged, offering nothing but pity. But Mama Zuri, an old woman in the shantytown, had changed everything, with her herbs, her prayers, and something intangible, something like magic. She'd coaxed Aisha back to her feet. "Mama Zuri can help Ellie," Malik insisted, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "But you have to trust me." Jonathan's instinct was to dismiss the boy, to signal his driver and leave this absurdity behind. He'd heard every pitch, every miracle cure. each one a dagger to his hope. But the mention of Ellie's name, spoken with such raw certainty, rooted him to the spot. He thought of the nights spent at her bedside, her wheelchair a silent reminder of his failure. He thought of the specialists who'd promised breakthroughs only to deliver apologies. What did he have to lose? "Where is this healer?" he asked, his tone guarded, as if testing the boy's resolve. Malik's face lit up, but a flicker of hesitation crossed his features. "It's not close, sir. And Mama Zuri doesn't take money. She only helps those who come with open hearts." Jonathan scoffed, his cynicism a reflex. Open hearts? He'd built his empire on logic, on contracts and calculations, not fairy tales. Yet the boy's words stirred something buried deep, a memory of a time when he believed in more than profit margins. He saw Ellie's face in his mind, her smile undimmed despite her pain, and felt a pang he couldn't ignore. "Take me to her," he said, stepping out of the car. The driver protested, citing schedules and safety, but Jonathan waved him off, his decision made in a heartbeat. "Lead the way, kid." The journey was a descent into a world Jonathan had only glimpsed. From his high-rise office, Malik led him through the city's underbelly, past graffiti-streaked walls and overflowing gutters, where the air smelled of smoke and survival. The shantytown loomed at the city's edge, a labyrinth of corrugated roofs and flickering fires, alive with the hum of resilience. Jonathan's polished shoes sank into the dirt, his suit drawing curious stares from children playing in the alleys. Malik moved with ease, greeting neighbors with a nod, his presence a small beacon in the chaos. "Almost there," he said, his voice bright but tinged with nerves, as if he knew the weight of what he was asking this stranger to believe. The hut they approached was unassuming, its walls patched with mismatched planks, its entrance draped with faded cloth. Dried herbs hung from the eaves, their earthy scent mingling with the smoke of a small fire. Inside, Mama Zuri sat by a low table, her silver hair braided tightly, her eyes sharp and knowing despite the lines etched into her face. She studied Jonathan, then Malik, her gaze piercing through the layers of wealth and want. "You bring a rich man to my door, little one," she said, her voice warm but firm, like a river smoothed by years of flow. "Does he come for miracles or for show?" Jonathan bristled, unaccustomed to being questioned, but Malik spoke first, his words steady. "He's here for his daughter, Mama. He's lost like I was." The word lost hit Jonathan like a stone, cracking the walls he'd built around his heart. Lost. It was the truth he'd never spoken aloud, not to his wife, not to his colleagues, not even to himself. He'd spent years chasing solutions, burying his pain under boardroom victories and charitable donations. But here, in this humble hut, with a boy who had nothing and a woman who asked for nothing, he felt exposed. "I'm here for Ellie," he said, his voice breaking, raw with a vulnerability he hadn't allowed in years. "I'll do anything." Mama Zuri's expression softened, but her eyes held a challenge. "Then you must do something you've forgotten how to do," she said. "You must believe." She spoke of her methods, herbal remedies passed down through generations, gentle exercises to awaken the body, and a deep trust in the spirit's power to heal. It wasn't a promise of instant miracles, but a process, one that demanded patience, faith, and a willingness to let go of control. Jonathan nodded, his throat tight, his mind racing with doubt and hope. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something he'd thought was gone forever. Possibility. They left the hut as dusk settled, the shantytown glowing with the soft light of oil lamps. Malik rode in the back of Jonathan's car, his tin cup left behind in the square, a symbol of the life he was daring to leave behind. At the Hargrove estate, Ellie waited in her room, her eyes bright with curiosity as her father introduced the boy who'd upended his world. "This is Malik," Jonathan said, his hand resting on the boy's shoulder, a gesture that felt strangely natural. "He's going to help us." Ellie, sharp and perceptive despite her frailty, studied Malik, sensing the kindness in his nervous smile. "You think I can walk again?" she asked, her voice soft but laced with a longing that pierced Jonathan's heart. Malik nodded, his certainty unshaken. "Mama Zuri helped my sister Aisha. She'll help you too." He told Ellie about Aisha, how she'd laughed again, run again, because of an old woman who saw hope where others saw only despair. Ellie listened, her fingers tracing the armrest of her wheelchair, her eyes alight with a spark Jonathan hadn't seen in months. That night, as he watched Ellie sleep, her face peaceful for the first time in too long, Jonathan felt the weight of his own disbelief lifting. He didn't know if Mama Zuri could work miracles, but Malik's courage, the boy's unshakable faith, had already changed something in him. For the first time, he dared to hope, not just for Ellie, but for himself. The Hargrove estate, with its marble floors and towering windows, felt like a cathedral of silence compared to the shantytown's vibrant chaos. Ellie's room, though filled with soft pastels and books she loved, carried the weight of her stillness, her wheelchair a constant shadow. Yet, as Malik stepped inside, his worn sneakers squeaking against the polished floor, the air seemed to shift, charged with a quiet electricity. His eyes, wide with wonder at the opulence, never lost their spark of purpose. He carried a small cloth bag, stuffed with Mama Zuri's herbs, and a conviction that made Jonathan's chest tighten. "This is where you live?" Malik asked Ellie, his voice a mix of awe and mischief. Ellie, propped against pillows, grinned, her pale face brightening. "Too big, right?" she said, her tone teasing but warm. In that moment, a bridge formed. Between them, a boy with nothing and a girl with everything, bound by a shared hope. Jonathan watched from the doorway, his arms crossed, his heart a tangle of doubt and longing. He'd agreed to this, bringing a beggar boy and a shantytown healer into his pristine world. But the absurdity of it gnawed at him. What was he doing, trusting a child's wild claim? Yet Malik's certainty, the way he spoke of Mama Zuri, with reverence, had cracked something open in Jonathan. He thought of Ellie's laughter, once a constant melody in their home, now a rare gift. He thought of the specialists who'd offered charts and jargon, but no miracles. "Let's get started," he said, his voice gruff, masking the tremor of hope he couldn't quite suppress. Mama Zuri arrived the next morning, her presence as commanding as it had been in her hut. Her silver braids gleamed under the chandeliers, light, and her eyes, sharp as ever, seemed to see through the walls of wealth to the raw pain beneath. She knelt beside Ellie, her hands gentle but firm, and spoke in a voice that carried the weight of 1,000 stories. "Your legs, child, they're not broken. They're waiting." She explained her approach, teas brewed from roots and leaves, exercises to awaken dormant muscles, and a belief that healing began in the spirit. "You must see yourself walking," she told Ellie, her words both a command and a caress. "Picture it, feel it, know it's yours." Ellie's eyes flickered with doubt, but Malik, sitting cross-legged on the floor, leaned forward. "It's like a story," he said, his voice earnest. "My sister Aisha, she couldn't walk either. But Mama Zuri told her to dream her steps first and then her body followed." He shared fragments of Aisha's recovery, how she'd cried through the pain, laughed through the triumphs, and one day ran to him across their tiny yard. Ellie listened, her fingers twisting the edge of her blanket, her heart stirring with a fragile hope. "Will you stay?" she asked Malik, her voice small. He grinned, his teeth bright against his dark skin. "Try and stop me." The days that followed were a dance of effort and patience. Mama Zuri came daily, her cloth bag brimming with remedies that smelled of earth and mystery. She massaged Ellie's, legs with oils that warmed her skin, guiding her through movements that left her trembling. Jonathan watched, his skepticism warring with the sight of his daughter's determination. Ellie's frustration spilled over some days. She'd snap at Mama Zuri, tears streaking her face when her legs refused to obey. But Malik was always there, his laughter a balm, his stories of the shanty town a window into a world Ellie had never known. He told her of street games played with bottle caps, of Aisha's dream to be a teacher, of the way the stars looked brighter when you had nothing else. Ellie began to see him not as a stranger, but as a friend, a brother she hadn't known she needed. Jonathan, too, was changing, though he fought to admit it. He'd always measured worth in dollars, in outcomes, in control. But Malik's presence, his relentless optimism, his selflessness, challenged that. One evening, as Malik helped Ellie practice standing, Jonathan overheard their conversation. "Why do you care so much?" Ellie asked, her voice soft, almost afraid of the answer. Malik shrugged, his eyes on the floor. "Because I know what it's like to be invisible. I just want you to feel seen." The words hit Jonathan like a wave, stirring memories of his own childhood, of a time before wealth when kindness was all he had. He turned away, his throat tight, unwilling to let Malik see the tears in his eyes. The turning point came weeks later, on a quiet afternoon bathed in golden light. Ellie, supported by Mama Zuri's steady hands, stood for longer than ever before. Her legs shook, her breath came in gasps, but her eyes burned with determination. Malik clapped, his voice loud with encouragement. "You're doing it, Ellie! You're stronger than you know!" Jonathan stood frozen, his heart pounding, as Ellie took a single, trembling step. It was small, unsteady, but it was hers. She collapsed into Mama Zuri's arms, laughing and crying at once, and Jonathan knelt beside her, his own tears falling freely. "You're doing it, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You're doing it." But the true climax was yet to come. Months into the process, Ellie's progress was undeniable. She could stand for minutes, walk a few steps with support, each movement a victory carved from pain and hope. One evening, as the family gathered in the garden, Ellie insisted on trying something new. "I want to walk to Malik," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Jonathan protested, but Mama Zuri nodded, her smile quiet but certain. "Let her try," she said. Malik stood 10 feet away, his hands outstretched, his grin wide. "Come on, Ellie, I'm right here." The garden fell silent, the only sound the rustle of leaves and Ellie's ragged breaths. She gripped Mama Zuri's arm, then let go, her body swaying as she took one step, then another. The third step faltered, and Jonathan's heart lurched, but Ellie caught herself, her eyes locked on Malik's. 4 steps. 5. Each one was a defiance of the years she'd spent bound to her chair. When she reached Malik, she collapsed into his arms, her laughter mingling with sobs. "You kept your promise," she whispered, her voice thick with gratitude. Malik hugged her tightly, his own eyes wet. "Told you, sir," he said, glancing at Jonathan. "Mama Zuri knows things." Jonathan's world shifted in that moment. He saw not just Ellie's steps, but the courage of a boy who dared to believe in a stranger's healing. He saw Mama Zuri's wisdom, born of a life spent giving without expectation. And he saw himself, a man who'd thought wealth was power, now humbled by the strength of kindness. He crossed the garden, pulling Malik and Ellie into a fierce embrace. His voice choked. "Thank you," he said, the words too small for the debt he felt. The transformation didn't end there. Jonathan couldn't let Malik return to the streets. He brought the boy and his sister Aisha into the Hargrove home, offering them a room, a chance at school, a future. Aisha, shy but bright, joined Ellie in her studies, their laughter filling the house. Mama Zuri refused payment, her only request that Jonathan pay it forward. He did, funding a clinic in the shantytown named for Mama Zuri, where her remedies could reach others. It wasn't charity. It was a reckoning, a recognition that his wealth meant nothing without humanity. The story rippled outward, whispered in the city's corners, not as a headline, but as a spark. A boy from the streets, a millionaire, a healer. They'd woven a miracle not of medicine, but of connection. Ellie's steps, still tentative, were a testament to the power of seeing someone, truly seeing them, beyond wealth or want. For every reader, in the USA or beyond, the message was a quiet thunder. Kindness can heal what money cannot, and a single act of courage, like Malik's voice in the square, can change everything. As Jonathan watched Ellie and Malik race through the garden, their laughter a song of hope, he knew he'd been healed too, his heart opened by a boy who'd given him back his daughter and so much more.